Welcome back to Block TV. Time for Crypto Crunch with one of the leading voices in the sphere, whom we're lucky enough to chat with weekly, namely Lou Kerner of CryptoOracle.io, and of course the master behind Crypto Mondays. Lou, lovely to have you with us, joining us from New York this morning. And no better time to have hello. No better time to have you on, given cryptocurrency debates entering the mainstream yet again as of late. This time with none other than the Bank of England's Governor, Mark Carney, speaking at the Challenges for Monetary Policy Banking Conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming last week. Carney took aim at the US dollar's destabilizing, quote unquote, role in the world economy. Now, in the same venue, he explained the idea behind that explosive statement. Let's have a listen.
Give us the thumbnail. Why can't the dollar be the global currency?
Okay, the dollar is the global currency. We know that. The challenge is that the U.S. share of the global economy has been reducing. The dollar's share of payments, not just financial assets, but payments, a lot of payments between countries that have nothing to do with the U.S. are in dollars. And what happens in situations like we're in today, where the U.S. economy, to its credit, is relatively strong, is doing better, and the Fed has been doing the right thing, which is, they've adjusted policy, they tightened policy as it was strengthening. Now they're making, the Fed is doing the right thing, but they have adjusted and policy is relatively strong. That means rest of world policy is tighter than it needs to be, and that feeds back on the U.S. economy in a way that ultimately slows this economy. And it leads to a substandard outcome. And in a world where you only have limited policy space, it's a dangerous place to be. And so the trade issues we're talking about are reinforced by the structure of the monetary system.
And Lou Kerner joining us from New York City, as we said, you had several takeaways from that explosive statement, so to speak, in a Medium blog. But as you rightfully prefaced in that article, before anything, it is important to appreciate who Mark Carney is, the governor of the Bank of England. A wunderkind, you said. How so?
Yeah, look, this is a guy who's just had an incredible career. After a number of years at Goldman, he became the youngest central banker in the world at 42 when he became the head of the Bank of Canada. And that was in, I think, around 2007. And then in 2012, he became the governor of the Bank of England, the first person in the history of the UK. So for about 425 years, they've had the Bank of England, that they had somebody who wasn't English running the Bank of England. And they did that because he's such an exceptionally talented guy.
An exceptionally talented guy, a very young guy. And as you said, he's not a Brit. Maybe that's why Brexit came about. That's a joke, of course. But that said, main takeaways from Carney, I found it remarkable because at the end of the day, that shows once again somebody in a very powerful capital market / mainstream finances, understanding that change is upon us. But what were the 4 takeaways from Carney at Jackson Hole?
Sure. Well, I think the major takeaway and the most interesting thing, as you were alluding to, was the fact that what Carney was saying was that because the U.S. dollar is so dominant as a means of payment, that it's kind of taken away the shock-absorbing elements of flexible or floating exchange rates. So if everything happens in dollars, it really kind of hamstrings central bankers around the world from using monetary policy to impact their economies. There's a kind of a traditionally an inflation versus output kind of volatility trade-off that central bankers have much less ability to impact, given that everything is traded on the dollar. So what Carney suggested is to create a basket of reserve currencies. So instead of just having the dollar, you can have multiple currencies be a part of it. Again, very similar to Libra.
I was about to say, that sounds like he was sitting with Zuckerberg. He's suggesting that basket, almost like to me it sounds like he's supporting the idea behind Libra, but I'm taking it one step too far. Continue, sorry.
Right, but I think what he wants it is to be run by central bankers. He thinks that that's the better outcome than having it run by Facebook. And he calls the digital currency SHC for synthetic hegemonic currency. And he also believes that if this became the dominant means of payment, then over time, the currencies that were part of that basket could also kind of attain reserve currency status on their own. And he thinks that would be, lead to a much better world, a world where the shock absorbers, again, could play the role across different countries that they're meant to play.
Ultimately, it's about who controls that new digital coin. Apropos that, we're speaking on the heels of a week that saw a fascinating, once again, cryptocurrency crossing into mainstream media. And that's on the agenda, fast approaching is Telegram's promise of the Gramm, which is getting much less hype than Libra, but as reported this week in the Times, as we said, I'm quoting, unlike Facebook, which released public plans for its digital money long before the first token was ready, Telegram has largely proceeded in secrecy. While Facebook's big cryptocurrency plans have hit a wall with regulators, another big social network, Telegram, is charging ahead with its own digital currency. Telegram has told investors that it is planning to send out the first batches of its coin, the Gramm, within the next 2 months, no less, according to 3 investor sources who have spoken with Telegram recently. That's quoted from the New York Times. One can trust them usually with their sources. They couldn't get an answer from Telegram spokesman, but Telegram does have access to 200 million users. Could this be actually, as we're all falling asleep at the wheel on Libra, could this be a game changer?
It could be. I mean, the super interesting thing about Telegram is, they, on one hand, they have this 200 million user base, which is really significant. On the other hand, they don't really care about regulators.
Right.
So, they're not going around asking for permission like Libra is, because if you ask for permission, the answer is going to be no. And so Telegram is not asking for permission. They're just going to, in some fashion, get the Telegram, the ton into the hands of, or the Gramm into the hands of the people. And potentially even people who didn't buy it will get some free grams if they're a Telegram member. So this is going to get cryptocurrency into the hands, of potentially, a much larger number of people than currently own cryptocurrency today. And that has got to be positive for the industry.
And I think it's, I think if anything, that probably is what's setting many things in motion right now. Maybe people in mainstream money understand it. I want to go back to Carney for a second, and mostly what he said, because you're sitting in the United States, Lou, and we're coming off one heck of a week of rhetoric when it comes to the trade war between the United States and China. Can it lead to a point, I mean, there's so much conflicting information. Do you think a recession is underway? That's my first question to you.
Look, I believe that the job of regulators, economies swing from side to side. I have a joke that the bubbles lead to crashes, lead to bubbles again, and that's what capitalism is. And it's the bankers' job. Central bankers try to tamp it down. They're not very good at it. That's why we got the massive crash in 2008. And we're now in record territory in terms of the length of this expansion in the United States, and nothing lasts forever. So we're going to get a recession. It's not like we now know how to run economies, so recessions don't happen anymore. And so whether it's today, tomorrow, or a year, the next recession is coming.
I'm wondering, because some people feel that it's around the corner. What does that do for cryptocurrencies at this point in time, if it happens?
Sure. I mean, it depends on how severe it is. I'm a huge believer in the physics of everything. And part of the reason why we've had this record expansion is because we had, really a record contraction. And so again, due to the physics of it, we're now getting this very long expansion. And it's my view that, just because of the physics of it, the recession we're going to get is going to be, the next recession is going to be very, very deep. And the tools that the central bankers have now to deal with this are very limited, in part because of what Carney was talking about, in part because interest rates are already negative. How much more negative can interest rates get around the world?
No, entirely. As the Chinese said, I can't believe we're quoting China, but fascinating times to live in. It's definitely not boring. Lou Kerner, such a pleasure always to speak with you. Crypto Crunch. We will see you also in 2 weeks in the big blockchain week that's being held in our neck of the woods in Tel Aviv. And have a great day. We were BLOCKTV. We'll be right back.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.